People who make their living out of cleaning murder scenes, accidents and the like. What is the worst thing you have experienced in your career? I posted this on another thread, so just copy and pasted it, but this was one that I had to do. Clean up after a murder. It was a rehab house for ex-cons, 4-bedroom house with communal bathroom and kitchen. Sunday morning and Guy A is in his room listening to music pretty loud. Guy B is in the kitchen cooking his breakfast. B knocks on A's door and tells him to turn it down. There's a small argument and B returns to his breakfast and A turns his music up. So B grabs the biggest knife in the kitchen, kicks in A's door and stabs him through his left shoulder, entering by his collarbone. A runs out of his room, across the landing, down the stairs, out the front door, back inside, back up the stairs and collapses on the landing. When I got there it was like a scene from a movie. Walls and ceilings, everywhere A had been were caked with blood. Apparently after B stabbed him, he returned to cooking his breakfast. There was a half-eaten breakfast in the kitchen when I got there. I mean, you're already going to jail at that point. Might be his last home-cooked meal ever. Yeah. Would sort of suck to be in that position and lose your appetite from all the blood and gore around. I've never been stabbed, so I'm one to talk. However, I took quite a path after being stabbed. Adrenaline's a hell of a drug. When I was a bartender, a couple of clients told me the worst part about the job is cleaning melted bodies. I don't know the science behind that, but from what I understand is if a body stays for a while in a certain condition of temperature and humidity, it melts. And those guys have to remove that person's remains in buckets. My reading comprehension left me for a moment and I thought you were saying that bartenders would occasionally have to clean melted bodies and was trying to figure out what kind of situation would lead to that. Now you know why it's called a Bloody Mary. I work in the ER. I was told by someone that works for a funeral home that they had to go get a girl that had overdosed and passed away. They said she had her breasts augmented and was pregnant. Turns out she overdosed while taking a bath and had decomposed enough that her breast implants and the fetus were floating around in the water. Then I clocked out and had lunch. Oh my. That was super visual. Me when I started reading this. What does her breasts being augmented have to do with anyth? Anguished face, anguished face. I want to unread the silicone fetus bath water story. Hope you didn't have soup. Friend of mine does this. His worst was an elderly woman who died in a bath. Skin falls off like long cooked meat. So he just saw piles of skin/flesh. Goddamn, just writing this makes me gag. I'm not a crime scene cleaner, but we used to transport coroner cases as part of our job. The elderly man who blew his head off with a shotgun in a third-story attic in the summer was rough. He'd been there a few weeks. We could smell him when we got out of the truck at the street. Blood spatter covered every inch of the walls in that room, as did the flies. Had to scrape some dried brain off the floor into a container for the coroner. When I went to roll him into a body bag, his bloated, slimy greenish-blue skin slipped off of him and I was left holding a large sheet of it with both hands. The worst part was his wife had passed a few weeks before. They had been one of those married for 60 years, inseparable couples. He just couldn't take it. That broke my heart. Other guys were puking. I cried silently. My dad worked for a very large auto auction. They took in a lot of repossessed cars and cleaned them, then resold. They got one car that had someone kill himself in it. He shot himself in the head. The body was gone when the car went to be cleaned, but the entire roof of the car was covered in bone fragments. The seat was rotted through because it hadn't been found for months. The entire car had to be taken to be incinerated. An alarming number of people rent cars too and shoot themselves in them. I never understood why. Because it's a rental, don't want to mess up your own car, duh. That's what they paid the rental insurance for. I think Bam said in CKY2K for $9 per day, insurance, you can do whatever the hell you want with a rental car. F. Thank you for the service you provide to society. Very few of us have to sacrifice that much. Working for a tow truck driver that get the calls after crashes. The worst one for me was a family of 6 coming back with over 10 pizzas for a baseball team. It was a head-on with a tractor-trailer, 18-wheeler. The ambulance took the bodies away, of course. Everyone died but one little guy. There was so much blood and vomit, diapers, toy dolls covered in blood. The pizza was everywhere inside of the car, like 2 inches thick on everything and all over the road. There was so many backpacks and things just covered in pizza blood, it is hard to even describe it to this day. It was oozing out all over the road and was like an exploded pizza pocket. Everyone that was waiting in the traffic jam looked horrified. Hey, as a former 911 dispatcher that called on towing services relentlessly for various things, thank you for what you do. Our service was always so kind and patient with us, despite the fact that we were always calling to change exact locations of an MVA at the last second. Unfortunately, when people are shaken up from an accident, they don't always have the wherewithal to give exact locations. The towing dispatcher I would call was the best and never complained. I know nothing could have prepared you for what you saw that day, but I hope you find comfort knowing there are people like me who value the service you provide very much. I bet it's horrible. Today I was actually driving on the interstate and traffic came to a halt because there was a car crash being cleaned up ahead. I decided to just roll my windows down and enjoy getting to sit still for a minute, and we slowly got to drive forward. As we approached the scene, we were probably going 5 miles an hour. There was a crew sweeping on the road. I assumed it was for glass from the crash, but I looked closer and there was flesh splatter all over the road. Looked like brain chunks or intestines. I was extremely disturbed and so sad knowing that somebody had just died right there. It felt very weird, being so close to something so tragic. All I could do was frown and sit in silence the rest of the drive home. Let's all take a moment to acknowledge that car crashes are one of the leading causes of death for pretty much all demographics. As we get older, we tend to die more of heart disease, cancer, and now COVID, but for people in their teenage, young adult, and adult demographics, it is right up there. Please remember this when driving. Replying to ad, wear your effing helmet if you're on a motorcycle or a scooter. A full face helmet and the appropriate riding gear. I saw a guy my age dead on the ground with a paramedic doing CPR with a woman wailing and screaming over him after an accident when I was heading to college classes one day. He had gotten hit, no helmet and no gear as far as I know. He might still be here if his head had been protected. Pretty sure he died of a head injury. The kid. I feel so bad about that kid. Imagine going through that and the flashbacks every time you smell pizza for the rest of your life. And that leads to the constant question by everyone, what? How can you not like pizza? Jesus Christ. Horrifying. For some reason, the idea of vomit at an accident scene had never occurred to me. It's terrifying to think of being alive long enough to vomit and possibly knowing/seeing the death and devastation around you. That gives me shivers, the bad ones. I spent some time with the coroner to shadow for school. They were showing me different cases and going over them, pictures included. The one that seemed to emotionally bother this particular guy the most was a scene where a father was coming home and pulling into the driveway. His daughter, 3 years old, was running to greet him and he didn't see her and ended up running over her head. The pictures were heartbreaking enough. I can't imagine what the dad went through when he saw her like that. There was another one that had 3 bodies. Some guy killed his wife, his affair partner, and her daughter, put them in a shed in the middle of summer and left town. They were found 3 weeks later, basically piles of putrid slime, maggots, like filled 10-gallon buckets full, and bloated body parts sloughing off as they tried to bag them. The murderer had a pilot's license and has never been caught. The decomposition room smelled for months after that. Are you from Idaho? Yep. The murder gave it away, didn't it? Actually, both. I'm from Boise and I'm pretty sure I know the poor guy who ran over his daughter and I remember hearing about the murders. Actually, both. I'm from Boise and I'm pretty sure I know the poor guy who ran over his daughter and I remember hearing about the murders, said the stranger with excitement. They're from Idaho. Any mention of anything from Idaho will cause them excitement. Can confirm even though I'm Finnish. People don't talk about us, so if someone even remotely mentions us, we lose our crap. Thought you were going to say Finnish people get excited about Idaho. Seriously, I was waiting for it and they didn't deliver. I'm pretty sure accidentally killing my toddler would be suicide-inducing for me. That's so tragic. Edit. I am not encouraging suicide. If you are feeling suicidal, please talk to someone, anyone for help. I've had 2 uncles and multiple friends commit suicide. Don't do it. I was merely observing that as someone who has never had suicidal thoughts but does have a 9-month-old child, I can understand the possibility of grief completely destroying my rationality. Yeah, I am sure I would be in a similar mindset. If I had other children, I might be staying for them. But it would be a hellish existence. Oh crap, I've listened to a podcast about this. If it's the same one, then the guy moved him and his wife and his mistress and her kid to a new town. The mistress and her kid were home and the wife was coming early to surprise him, and instead of facing the facts he just killed them all and bounced. Not me personally, but my dad used to be an EMT/firefighter. In the late 80s, he got a call about a horrid smell coming from the neighbor's house of the person calling. It knowing what it was, EMT, firefighter, and police were dispatched. They found the house was owned by a single old lady who died in her living room chair. Not too bad, right? Wrong. The chair was an old leather recliner, and as she was decomposing she melted and fused with the leather chair. When the EMTs got there they had to remove her from the house, and when they tried to pull her off, her back skin, arms and lower body separated from the rest of her body and remained attached to the chair. Decomposing flesh, blood and organs fell out and all over the charring floor. People were vomiting every 10 seconds and couldn't stand to be inside longer than a few minutes. My dad describes the smell and scene as the worst thing he has ever seen. Her body was so decomposed she was basically liquid inside with a fragile shell. He had to leave and grab a full respirator from the fire truck, and even then it didn't do jack crap. The others took turns going in to retrieve the pieces so they can be disposed of. When they were finished they burned the chair in the front yard. Holy crap, this is the worst one. Basically liquid inside with a fragile shell. We are but ugly bags of mostly water after all. This made me want to throw up. Jesus Christ. This one is so awful it loops through metal and into comedy horror. What a vivid effing description. Teen girl had to be pieced back together. Steering column went through her chest like a straw through a slice of cheese. Had to put the hamburgered heart back together. I'll never be able to put my straw through cheese slices again. Hamburgered as an adjective is absolutely horrific. I work in disaster cleanup, including biohazard scenes. Sadly, it's only gotten worse since the corona. Suicides have spiked. Murder is up. Old folks dying at home alone and people not realizing for longer because they don't want to give grandma and grandpa the virus. You would think they'd still pick up the phone and call? They are all awful. From the man who murdered his mom with a weight, to the man who shot himself in the head then walked all around the house bleeding everywhere, to the man who shot himself and we had to scrub blood off the baby bassinet, to the old man who died in a senior independent living facility who had no furniture and just a sleeping bag on the ground with garbage and feces stains everywhere. He wasn't found for some time. That one really bothered me a lot. Seeing someone who lived in those conditions and no one knew or maybe didn't care or they didn't realize he was gone until the odor got too bad. I used to pick up dead bodies for a living, and the worst one was a 420-pound man who died in his apartment in the middle of Oz summer with no electricity and had been dead a week. The guy was bloated, slimy green and stinky. The apartment didn't have adequate stairs to get him down on a gurney. 6 guys including myself had to carry this body on a stretcher downstairs, and while right in the middle of the trip down he let out a death fart. How did this impact me? All farts I've smelt since then haven't been crap compared to that one. I knew a guy who had to clean a room back east where the person had been deceased for some time and he had to walk through a shin-deep layer of dead flies. He said there was enough maggots you could hear them, something I have also experienced. Disco rice can make an odd noise, but they had to bring a vacuum truck to get all the flies out. At that point, in my opinion, just burn the damn house down. Disco rice. Please, never say something like that again. It would have cost you $0 to word it like anything else and you had to word it like that. Edit, take this gold and never say that term again. Edit 2, to all of you who come up the clever names for maggots, most of them I found funny, but seriously, just no. True. If you've ever been around maggots and a strobe or black light, it feels more like a rave than disco. Or like a death metal video. I don't know. Those 2 words alone cause such a visceral reaction. Amazing imagery analogy though. Can't deny that. Alright. I've worked crafty jobs. I've changed more adult diapers than I can count. I've been bitten, kicked, punched. I've had feces and cum thrown at me. I had a client throw her used pad at me. You just made me gag. I performed that job as well, one of the saddest summers of my college career in my opinion. Worst one I went to was when the officer met us at the end of the driveway and wasn't having any of it, which was a bad sign. As we approached, the windows were black and my partner mentioned to grab lights. Once we gained entry, we automatically knew what was what, and discovered the blackened windows were actually flies that had hatched from the maggots still actively breeding on the corpse on the bed. It was pretty much down to the bone structure and whatever remaining flesh the maggots hadn't ate yet. The oddest thing about this whole environment was in this tiny living space was a small black and white TV in the kitchen playing Michael Jackson's Thriller. I'll never forget that ever. Kudos for being able to be a body removal tech. I got out after that summer and I did roughly 15 to 20 calls, including a homicide of a mother versus very young daughter, the daughter being the victim. Holy F, that's rough. But thank you for doing your job. Someone has to do it. If I may ask, how did you choose this profession and has it impacted your emotional state over the years? If you don't want to answer, it's okay, but I'm really interested in your story. There are jobs that need to be done regardless of their lack of glamour or desirability. These jobs are essential towards the living, healing, and recovering from tragedy. My emotional state seems fine. There are just certainly situations that stick with you, and some are much sadder or angering than others. Hope you know you're appreciated even if you might not hear it often. Heart. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.